What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Phaithful Phanatics show, exclusively here on the YouTube channel this Monday afternoon. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe to the DSM Philadelphia YouTube channel. Make sure to turn on notifications, all that good stuff. I am your host today, Dylan Davis. You can find me on Twitter at DylanJD98. To my right, guest starring on the show today, friend of the show, Mr. Paul Hembekides from ESPN's Get Up. You might know him as Sneaky Hembo, my man. What is going on? And thanks for coming on the show today.
No, it's always a pleasure. As we get ready to talk Eagles Bucs, I don't know if I'm the only one that feels this way, but no matter when we play Tampa, no matter how good they are, no matter how bad they are, for some reason, like that 2002 NFC title game, I just can't ever get out of my head. Yeah, the 27-10 Rondé Barber return, and then obviously a couple of years ago when Jalen Hurts in the offense just had absolutely no chance against Tampa in that season. Like, I don't know why, but for some reason, they're one of the few teams that I always kind of dread playing because of that muscle memory. That 0-2 NFC title game was like one of the most formative experiences of my young fandom, and for some reason, I've never been able to shake it.
You know they'll show that video on the broadcast tonight as well. So you'll get to relive that memory tonight, man. But let's start there. Let's start with the Eagles. We're also going to talk Phillies, playoff run, all of that later on in the show. We got about a half hour with Hembo today, guys. But listen, let's start with the Birds. They are 2-0 heading into this matchup versus the Bucs. But it feels like more of the conversations I've had with people have been more or less about concerns than the actual wins themselves. Very similar to the start of last year versus Detroit, right? And it's funny when you look around the league and you see the Cowboys lose to Josh Dobbs and Jonathan Gannon. The Ravens lose at home to Gardner Minshew and the Colts. The Bengals are 0-2. The Vikings are 0-3. All of these teams, all these fan bases, I'm sure would love a quote-unquote ugly win right about now. What are your thoughts through the first 2 weeks? Do you have any real concerns? Don't get me wrong. Things have not looked pretty. Brian Johnson, question mark, right? Jalen Hurts not seeing the field real well right now. You have the RB1 conversations from weeks 1 to 2. It hasn't been pretty, but are there real concerns to take forward, or should we just be happy that there's two, notches in the win column right now?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to those questions is yes. Like, I think it just kind of depends on what kind of fan you are. If you're going to take the half glass full approach, which I do the best I can to do as often as I can, although it's not necessarily second nature, I say to myself, 2-0 is a good place to be. The Eagles have led by two scores in both of those games, even though the finals weren't that pretty. In week 2, they were able to just bludgeon people with their run game, which looks like it's supposed to. And in some sense, the mark of a good team or a great team is the ability to win when you play C or D football, which the Eagles have. The glass half empty approach is all of a sudden we're occupying a conference where it looks like San Francisco's gotten better. And it looks like Dallas, with the exception of week 3, at least is going to be really live again this season. At least that is my expectation. When you consider that the passing game has been highly inefficient and unsuccessful, when you consider that there are definite weaknesses along the spine of this defense, you have to worry. Like, a lot of the same things that we gave the Eagles a hard time about last year when we were nitpicking are still there, except those issues are exacerbated because of the change in personnel and because of the change in coaching. So I actually think it's fair to be concerned based upon expectation. The reason last year was such a joyride was because we came into the year with high expectations, but not we're going to the Super Bowl for sure expectations. The Eagles wound up meeting almost no adversity throughout the season, and they blew out both of their playoff opponents in the NFC playoffs before getting to the Super Bowl. Like, there was just no resistance at all. They've already met that resistance, and I think we should expect that this year it's just not going to be that easy. So as a fan, that's how you have to temper your expectations. Last year, everything was given to us. The schedule was easy. The Eagles honestly snuck up on a lot of teams, and Jalen Hurts took that big leap. That's not going to happen again, and we got to wrap our minds around that. So, like, when we're watching the games, it's through that prism this season.
So the offensive side of things, right? I have a question about RB1 in a second, but Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, Brian Johnson, what do you attribute the most, I don't want to say blame to, because again, 2-0, they put up 34 points last week, but what do you attribute the sluggish start to the offensive side of the ball to? Jalen maybe not playing in the preseason, Nick saying he's going to rethink his approach? Is it Brian Johnson? It kind of feels like Nick might have his hand in the cookie jar again when it comes to play calling, a little bit similar to last year before, or 2 years ago before he gave it up to Steichen. What do you think is kind of most to look at right now?
So it's going to be one of those things where, like, the answer to this question is multifaceted. Like, there's not a monocausal explanation to this, obviously, but that's, part of, why we do this. Like, this is not so easy as picking and choosing. This is the problem. Like, we're not doing TV here, right? let's dive into the box score. So I think the Eagles really miss Shane Steichen.
Okay.
He was really good at his job, and I think we're seeing that already, given the fact that the Colts are 2-1 with Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to design a game plan. It's one thing to call plays. It's another thing to be able to call a game. And Shane Steichen was really good at that, and his experience and track record with Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts and the development of those guys, I think, was admirable. And I think the fact that he's gone now is obviously something that the Eagles were going to miss, and we should have seen that coming, and many of us did. All right, so that's one thing. There's also a Jalen Hurts conversation to be had here, because Jalen Hurts a year ago, right? We'll say a year and 2 weeks ago, was very much in a prove it scenario. Like, demonstrate to us that you are our quarterback of the future, and he passed that test with flying colors. Mm-hmm. A huge part of that is the fact that he added enormous value last season in the run game. And when you run the ball the way that Jalen Hurts ran the ball last year, he changes the math on every play, and it provides the defense with way fewer answers than you would otherwise have. Right now, Jalen Hurts is not running the ball with nearly the same level of efficacy as last year, whether that's by design or whether that's by accident. Right. That's something that I do expect to change. But all of a sudden, when the math is the same, you're asking Jalen Hurts to be a pocket-ish quarterback. Mm-hmm. And Jalen Hurts is a capable pocket-ish quarterback, but he isn't Tom Brady. You know, he's not Peyton Manning. Right. He's not Drew Brees. Those guys go to the Hall of Fame for a reason. Like, Jalen Hurts' full package last year was he's the second best player in the league behind Patrick Mahomes. Correct. But Jalen Hurts this season, when you take away some of that value early on, all of a sudden makes everything in the pass game so much harder. It makes it more difficult, you know, for the easy completions to A.J. Brown, for the stuff across the middle to Dallas Goedert, for the how in the world is that guy so wide open type plays that we experienced last year. And now the passing game is super reliant on the chunk plays rather than the methodical stuff. So I think that's a lot of answers to your question. But because we have, you know, the opportunity here to unpack it all, I think it's fair to do so.
Yeah. How do you feel about that, by the way? Because that was a big topic of conversation throughout the offseason and on your network specifically on kind of designing this offense to have Jalen carry the ball less, to not put him in that position to get hit as much. Are you okay with, I guess, not risking his health and kind of going through this learning curve of being more of a pocket quarterback? Or are you going to kind of slowly get to the point where if the offense keeps looking sluggish, I got to take the training wheels back off and he's got to run?
Yeah, the answer is B. I'm willing to absorb the heightened injury risk so long as Jalen Hurts. The rewards there. Yeah, so long as Jalen Hurts can still add that requisite value in the run game. So this is one of those conversations where, like, you're always playing the outcome, because look, Aaron Rodgers is a pocket quarterback and he blew out his Achilles on the fourth play of the game. We've seen many a pocket quarterbacks have catastrophic season-ending injuries, and we've seen many super mobile guys have really, really long, storied, successful careers without getting nicked up, and that surprises us. So, like, these things are always circumstantial. My opinion is that we can get rid of the 2nd and 6th design quarterback run for Jalen Hurts, but what we should not get rid of is the let's pick up this first down when we need it type. Let's not get rid of the, all right, he's scrambling out and he's got a first down, let's take the yards we know we can get rather than the pass we think we can get. So I think we should not coach that out of him. I don't want him to suffer the same kind of, you know, injury that he had in Chicago last year, which cost him the end of the season. Obviously, that goes without saying. But we paid him now. All right, this is not a scenario now where, like, you're asking a quarterback to go out there and be a mercenary. He was made the highest paid quarterback in NFL history at the time of that contract. So you can be a big boy now. And if you do suffer that injury, it's not going to affect your future earnings. So to me, like, that's a complicated way, again, to answer a very simple question. But you should never take away something that someone does really, really well. If a pitcher is having a lot of arm fatigue because he's throwing a bunch of sliders, but it's his best pitch, you're probably going to keep calling that pitch in high leverage moments because you need the out, right? Like, that's just how it goes. And so I want to see Jalen Hurts run the ball, whether it be by design, whether it be on scramble drill, half a dozen times every game with rare exception.
Yeah, because I think it's clear that they've kind of coached Jalen up to take less hits and to protect himself more. But my issue is, I saw it in New England week 1. I don't know if I saw it so much last week, but in New England week 1, I believe it was 1st and 10, 2nd and 10, and a design quarterback run, and he slides at the line of scrimmage. You got to crumble that play call up and throw it out if his mindset is, I'm sliding after 1 yard because I need to protect myself. There's no point in calling that play call. Speaking of running the ball, right? For whatever reason, and maybe you can explain this better to me. Kenneth Gainwell got a lot of traction throughout the offseason, and Kenneth Gainwell was RB1 week 1 before his injury. And I like Kenny G, Hembo. I like him. There's a role for him on this team. But he goes down week 2, and DeAndre Swift is already like top 3 in rushing through 2 weeks, and he didn't get a carry in week 1. Is the answer pretty clear? Is DeAndre Swift the clear and true number 1 running back? Nick keeps saying we'll give it to the hot hand. No, he is the hot hand, man. Give DeAndre Swift the bulk of the carries. Am I wrong here?
No, you're not wrong here. I don't necessarily disagree with Sirianni's hot hand theory, because I think that's the thing that you're supposed to say out loud
Right,
to the media.
okay.
Like, that's, like he's not speaking to his team there. He's speaking to
Right.
us, right? Who gives a rip? But DeAndre Swift is the best back. He's the best feature back on your team. You also have to remember that the best method of coaching is the one that maximizes the skill set of your players. And you're not maximizing the skill set of Kenneth Gainwell if you're giving him 20 touches a game. Like, he's a change of pace back. Like, he's like a shot of energy type. He's a fireball, right? That's what you don't want him in between the tackles getting himself beat up in the second quarter. Like, that's not him. DeAndre Swift is an NFL back who has demonstrated over a long period of time that he can absorb that workload, and that he can pop big plays still, and that he can get you those incremental first downs and move the chains in that sense, and someone that you can ride if your offensive line is humming, right? I don't need to see if Kenny Gainwell can prove that if we already know what we have. It's just like the Eagles' depth of that position is a luxury.
Yeah.
Let's not try and reinvent the wheel here. Let's just do what our players are great at and stick with it. And there might be a time where Nick decides, like, all right, we're going to give DeAndre sort of a breather this week and give him 8 or 10 touches because we're trying to maximize our chances in the playoffs or next week, whatever the case may be.
Okay.
And that's where the depth plays in. But the objective is to try and win every game. And I think so long as you are trying to fulfill that objective,
Right.
DeAndre Swift should be your back so long as he's anywhere near 100%, regardless of the Kenneth Gainwell truthers out there.
Yeah, man, it was just like they're trying to force feed you whatever they saw in the offseason, whatever they think of Kenneth Gainwell, and the reason, he was utilized more than Miles Sanders come playoff time last year. Whatever the case was, it's like, man, I don't need to see it anymore. Like, especially when you hear when you see the clips of Smitty talking about DeAndre Swift when he's on the field with him, like, dude, like it's clear who the most talented running back is in that room. All right, let's get to tonight's game against the Bucs, because you mentioned kind of my thought process heading into this one, right? It doesn't matter what your expectations are of the Bucs, how they're playing at that point in time. Coming into this year, this is one of the games on the schedule where you probably marked the W across for the Eagles, except Baker's got the boys at 2-0, and this is a much tougher battle now on paper than it looks like, right? How do the Eagles match up with Tampa Bay? This is not 2 years ago, 2020, 2021 playoff matchup. Jalen can't throw the ball from the pocket. That defensive line is going to stop the run. How do the Birds match up tonight?
Not that favorably. I feel strongly that the Eagles right now giving 5 points is too many. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see the Eagles run away in height tonight, and they might. Like, anytime you're going up against Baker Mayfield,
Right.
on prime time, like there's a chance that he winds up crapping the bed. But matchup wise, I don't love this from the Eagles' perspective, mostly because of how Jalen Hurts has historically struggled against Todd Bowles defenses and against Todd Bowles like defenses, like the blitz happy, aggressive, scheme pressure. Like that, the kind of the Brian Flores sort of school, from last week was pretty effective against Jalen, and Todd Bowles does a lot of the same stuff. Like, when you just look at the kind of defenses that Jalen Hurts has struggled with historically, like lining up Bill Belichick, Brian Flores, and Todd Bowles to start the season is a heck of a test for our newly minted $200 million quarterback. It really is. So that's a long roundabout way of saying I think it's going to be a slugfest. I think the Eagles' passing game is going to continue to be a work in progress. I think you might well see the AJ Brown feed me stuff on the sideline. I think you still might see a kind of light or shallow game from Dallas Goedert. The one thing I am confident is that the Eagles should have some measure of success running the ball. I love the Vita, Jason Kelce matchup. That's going to be a defining matchup in this game, because if Jason Kelce can, at least with some consistency, win that, it'll let the Eagles off the hook from a passing game perspective, at least to some degree, and you can at least go hang your hat on one thing. Like, this is a hang my hat game, and we're going to be able to run the ball the way that we did against in week 2. But if the Eagles do build an early deficit, and if the Eagles don't have the same level of success rushing the ball, I actually think it's a big test for Jalen Hurts on national TV against a defense that has given him fits historically. I don't trust Baker Mayfield and that offense against us, although I will say that Mike Evans is someone that you're just scared of because he can just, win one-on-one in a contested catch world, much like A.J. Brown can do. And so if you're living in a world in which this game is high teens, low 20s, one Mike Evans, top off the defense play could wind up killing you. I'm entering this game a little bit more tepidly than I would like to, but I'm not going to come in here and blow smoke and tell you I think the Eagles are going to win by 100. That's not why you have me on the show.
Right. No. That's interesting, man, because my next question was kind of going to be, we're talking offense, and sluggish start in week 1. Last week was more so about the running game and the rushing attack from DeAndre Swift. Was tonight going to be that coming out party for Jalen Hurts in 2023? I've seen a couple different people, John Clark on social media, saying that he believes that the Eagles wide receiver duo of Smitty and A.J. Brown could have a big night against the secondary of Tampa Bay. How do you look at that matchup? Is it more close than people think?
It's for sure. The Buccaneers DB room's really good. Like a lot of the biggest reason the Bucs won the Super Bowl in 2020 was obviously Tom Brady's impact on the roster, and then the fact that they had dudes on defense. A lot of those dudes are still there. They got studs on all 3 levels. They still got Winfield and Davis in the secondary, White, and then Vea up front. Like these are still like back into their prime studs on the defense. Like that's what I think look, if the Eagles offense and the Eagles passing game winds up coming out tonight, no one will be happier than I will be. But there just hasn't been much evidence based upon 2 games of film for the Eagles and 2 games of film for the Bucs and Jalen Hurts' track record against this style defense that's going to happen tonight. It might well happen tonight. I think what you are likelier to see tonight is a more conservative pass game because that's what the Buccaneers are going to I think probably force Jalen Hurts into, and a heavier emphasis on the run game. And they say we're going to dare you to put 8, 10, 12 play drives together because last year you could do it. So far through 2 games, the only thing that you've been able to demonstrate is that you can hit a couple explosive plays here and there. And I think the Bucs are going to take away that first and foremost. I don't see it as a coming out party for Jalen Hurts this season because I don't think the Eagles have this huge matchup advantage on the outside the way that some do.
I think this is a huge test for patience from Jalen and Nick and Brian Johnson tonight because, look, man, you've had, 10, 11 days to prepare for this. The question marks, the numbers and what your offense have struggled to do so far. So, like you said, what is Todd Bowles, what is that defense going to give you tonight? Are they going to be willing to stay patient and take the underneath stuff and continue to run the ball rather than force the deep ball? Chicago, when he got hurt, throw. We'll see what they decide to do tonight. We've spent the first 17 minutes talking offense. Defensively, obviously, Avonte Maddox goes down. Looks like it's season ending for right now. Obviously, they don't have Nakobe Dean. Reed Blankenship is expected back tonight, but James Bradberry is moving to the slot, to the nickel tonight. Obviously, Chris Godwin is one of the most deadliest slot receivers in the league. That sounds all well and good tonight. My question isn't just about tonight. It's a little bit long-term right now. Like I said, all-pro James Bradberry from last year on the outside. I don't know. This is not a long-term fill-in. Does Howie have to get busy? What does the future look like for the Eagles secondary right now in terms of Bradberry, the nickel, all of that?
It's a good question, and it's a good inside the game question. I don't view this as a demotion the way that some do.
No.
When you just take inventory around the league and you see how offensive coaches exploit mismatches from the slot, to me, this is a thing that we'll keep seeing more and more of, and I don't view this as a demotion in any way for James Bradberry, who is good enough to be able to pull this off. I think it's honestly more commentary.
I think it's kudos to him for taking the assignment.
100%. It's like asking someone to move up or down the lineup because it's going to make the team better. I view it that way. It's not like his performance has dictated this is necessary or anything. So I'm not worried about that. Do I think that Howie Roseman might well add a slot corner before the trade deadline? For sure. I think that is definitely on the list of options. It's not obvious to me yet, who's going to be a seller or how much the Eagles might be willing to give up. And in a perfect world, you can hold the fort with the people that you have right now so you don't have to forfeit future capital. But the one thing in the league that you can't have too much of is depth along your O-line or in your cornerback room. And that's a big thing. And so for the Eagles to already be stretched thin in that area is obviously an enormously consequential thing because, CeeDee Lamb's really good out of the slot. And so is Deebo Samuel. Mm-hmm. And so is Christian McCaffrey. And Tony Pollard will even go there from time to time. So this is going to be a thing. Like the Eagles are going to have to make sure they get this right. I trust Darius Slay. I trust James Bradbury. But like this is going to be part of the evolution, right? Like this team wasn't going to be as stacked as it was last year, and this team was going to encounter more things this year with a more difficult schedule. And these are the things that just happen, right? Like when you lose the Super Bowl, you play a first place schedule. You're a target on your back team for like every single team is out to get you, right? And so the Eagles are going to have to be able to galvanize themselves from within. And when things like this happen, how do I adjust? How can I do my job better? How can I make sure that I'm maximizing our chances to win based upon what we have? All those things apply. I actually think this is a good decision by the coaching staff and might make the Eagles better in between the numbers, which I actually think is going to be a big priority for this defense.
I think it's huge, and I'm shocked they're doing it because I don't think this is something you see last year under Jonathan Gannon or in previous years under Jim Schwartz. Like to take that all-pro corner on the outside, this is where he's best, but maybe I feel more comfortable with him and Josh Jobe or Eli Ricks on the outside than I do with him at his best on the outside and Mario Goodrich one-on-one with Chris Godwin all day. It's not going to work out well for you, man. I don't know how well it's going to work out for James Bradbury making this adjustment against Chris Godwin, but it's damn sure not going to work out for Mario Goodrich. All right, before we move on to the Phillies and playoff talk, do the Eagles come away with a win even though you don't like them laying 5?
Yes, I think the Eagles win the game outright tonight. I think it will be a 2, 3, 4 point win. It might even be a backdoor Bucs cover. It wouldn't surprise me if they even covered the number. I just think it's a big number for a road game for a team that I don't think that we should take lightly. Just how bad the offense has looked. This is not like an affirmation of Baker Mayfield, who I think is just a fringe starter. I don't really think that Bucs roster is even all that great. I just think matchup wise, this is a tough spot. So if the Eagles wind up drop kicking the Bucs tonight, I'll be thrilled. But based upon all the information that we have, honest opinion is that the Eagles win a close game here. And so like I'm not going to spot on 5 points. If I'm going to make bets on the game tonight, it's going to be more in the world of props.
So speaking of make bets on the game tonight, selfishly, you've kind of talked me out of the bet I've already placed because of the offense. But it doesn't need to be offense. It can be defense, special teams, anything. Eagles team total touchdowns under over 2.5. I took the over at -150 so far. Even if this is a slugfest, whatever, do the Eagles score 3 or more touchdowns tonight?
Yeah, the Eagles should score 3 touchdowns tonight. I also think the
Thank you for making me feel better.
I think the Eagles are. I think this is like a mid to upper 20s in the output for the Eagles. Like I think that's kind of where they'll be. I also think that they'll be more aggressive in scoring position and not just ask Jake Elliott to kick bombs, from the moon. Lastly, you're going to hear the broadcast tonight, I would imagine, really highlight Jalen Carter and this defensive line. That's a huge advantage for the Eagles. Like if the Eagles wind up, winning this game by double digits, it's going to be because Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat and Jalen Carter and Milton Williams and all the dudes. Right?
Need it, man.
That's going to be the Eagles' biggest advantage. And in a game like this, you could definitely see that playing up against the quarterback that historically obviously struggles against teams like this. That's the Eagles' biggest advantage. And if those guys can get the Bucs into second and third and long, I think it could be a long night for Baker and the boys.
Yeah, man, I hope so. We need it. Hassan Reddick sackless through the first 2 weeks of the season. Jordan Davis with a sack and a half so far to start the year. Numbers playing out a little differently than we expected, but hopefully they can come out and get after Baker tonight. We got a couple minutes left, so we'll go through this as